This episode of ChatGPD was made possible by the hard work and creativity of our production team. A huge thank you to Emily Young, Chris Sang, and Alakia Chandran for their expert production, editing, and behind the scenes magic that brings each conversation to life. We also want to thank Sarah Topa and the IMS for their support in helping us share ideas, stories, and resources that empower our grad students at every stage of their journey.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Chat GPD, our podcast on careers in biomedical sciences. I'm Pamela Plant, and today with me we have a regulatory affairs professional, Matthew G. from Siemens Healthineers. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
Pleased to have you. So I'm hoping we can start by you just describing in lay terms what a regulatory affairs professional does, and follow that with your own journey to get there.
Sure. So regulatory affairs is all about building up a relationship between the company and regulatory agencies. So Health Canada, US FDA. So what typically a regulatory affairs professional does, there's different roles. So you get a global role or a regional role. But a global role, we'll start there, is primarily involved with product development. So they'll sit on product development teams to make sure that the regulatory requirements from the various countries get incorporated into the design goals of the product. And then they'll sit on that team to make sure that it's developed according to those goals, and then review the documentation to make sure that all the testing passes. Then where regulatory comes to shine is they take the final product, the outputs from all that testing, and all that data then has to be put into a regulatory submission package so that the regulatory agencies review. So typically they'll work either alone or with a team of the regulatory professionals, put together the package that will go to, let's say, the FDA. And that usually takes, let's say, anywhere between 1 to 2 months to put together the package, working pretty much full-time every day. It's usually a big package. Well, it depends on
The scope of the project, yeah.
But usually, let's say 1 to 2 months to put that together. And then once that goes in, then they're now the direct interface between the regulatory agency. So all the back and forth, all the questions, they're the face of the company to the regulatory agency. So yeah, and I'm only speaking from regulatory affairs from the industry perspective, but you can also have regulatory affairs on the agency as well. So they see the opposite. But from the industry side, I mean, they're representing the company. And the way I like to see it as they're kind of like one aspect to getting the product right? So all the various functions like R&D will put together a package, and then the regulatory affairs is kind of like the last check to make sure that the information is correct, but also it's one step to make sure that the product is helpful and not harmful to patients.
And it's also a necessary step because it's not going to market without regulatory approval.
Right,
So
right.
it's that kind of final rubber stamp.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're making sure that a regulatory affairs professional in the company will say, is this ready to go? Have we met everything? Is it safe? Is it effective? And then it goes to the agency, and they do their own review. So, but I see it as a partnership, right? You need to have good quality before it goes to the agency, because that'll ensure that, one, the review goes smoother, but also we're not putting out information that or products that could
Potentially harmful,
Yeah.
So Matt, I also learned the difference between regulatory affairs roles in device, pharma, biologics. We're going to touch on that later, but I'd really love to hear about your journey because it is a fascinating one. So tell us how you came to be a regulatory affairs professional.
So basically it started because it was my first, I took a job I started at Bayer Pharma, so in a pharmaceutical role. I actually started in clinical, I was in more of a clinical affairs support role. I was trying to maintain the clinical files. So I did that for my first summer after graduating high school. So I did 2 months I mean, it was great. Came back the next year. The only option to me was regulatory affairs, and I thought, I really, from seeing how miserable people looked the previous year, I don't want to do this job. But realizing that job is what you make of it,
Yeah, good
it
for
changed
you.
my mindset and turned out to be basically my entire career up until relatively recently. Really had fantastic, fantastic manager, director. They really supported me. And what happened was I worked part-time throughout undergrad and grad school in, well, when I was doing my master's degree, when and that was just a nice reprieve, basically. So when things didn't go well and
In the
in the
lab, or in
lab,
the, yeah, you had something to fall back
yeah,
on that was productive, you were earning
exactly.
money,
Yeah.
it was, yeah, gaining experience.
So after my master's degree, I went, didn't really have a plan, but decided, well, let's give it a shot. I'll just, do this for a little
Dive
bit.
right in.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be permanent, but I'll just join back for at least, a couple years, see how it goes. And then life happens, right? So there was a big merger, and then a divestiture, and I was part of that divestiture. I joined. I was divested off to Siemens, who became Siemens Healthineers, our division, and are supporting our in vitro diagnostics. So in vitro diagnostics, as you know, they're blood tests. We make primarily blood tests. So, and it focuses on laboratory instruments. So when you go to a hospital and you have your blood drawn, all of the array of tests that they run on our analyzers. So I focus primarily on, my biggest role is immunoassays.
Nice.
That's what I focus primarily on through my career in regulatory affairs. So yeah, I was then kind of alone, being the sole regulatory affairs representative for Siemens Healthineers in Canada for the diagnostic side, and fully accountable. Had to create process, make sure that the business was up and running on day one. Which, I mean, it's the amount of trust that was given to me from my previous manager and then the team over at Siemens to allow me to step into that role, basically new career, was fantastic. So I did that for a few years, but then realized one thing that I missed in pharma is you have some more aspect with product development. So I made a decision to move down to the US to be more involved on a global role, so I could have that exposure to product development. So so that is where, you sit on product development teams, as I was mentioning earlier. So that's really what I really loved doing, and I did that for quite a long time, close to 10 years doing that role.
Is that role only possible in the US? Do they have kind of global teams in Canada, or do you have to translocate?
So, yeah, I think things are changing now. What I'd say is, when I moved, well, I think there's still a problem now that Canada doesn't have enough big companies headquartered here. So yeah, you would tend to have to go where the headquarters function is, or the big manufacturing plant, or the product development center is.
So is that New York, San Francisco area, and then Europe, or where in Europe?
It really depends on the company.
Yeah.
Right. So
Okay.
wherever their big center of operations, center of excellence is. So there are places around. I know Montreal used to have good pharma development. I don't think they have as much now
Not so
as
much
they
anymore.
used to, because I know Merck pulled up. But I mean, there definitely are smaller companies in Canada, so you get a different experience working for a smaller company. You have one or two couple products rather than a massive array of products that need tons of support, right? So it's a different experience, but those definitely exist. But it's probably harder to get into those roles without having experience, because as you can imagine, a startup company wants someone with a lot of experience.
Hit the ground running.
So yeah. They don't want, it's either hit or miss, or the company can go bankrupt. So I think it's harder. I think, right, what I would love to see is more investment not to get political, but I would love to see more investment in Canada. So I think we have a lot of talented graduates
Yeah.
that could really do a lot of good in a more of a basic science or an R&D development for some of these larger companies.
And I will definitely touch on that later. I'd love to hear your advice for students that are actually entertaining roles in regulatory affairs. But I want you to continue on your journey because you came back to Canada and you came back to IMS for your PhD. And I want to unpack that because I think it's fascinating. But you last left us off when you were in the US.
Yes. So I moved down there. Now, to answer your previous question, I think there are opportunities now because of remote working. I think there is some more flexibility. So as long as there's a regional company, typically what can happen is, companies have to be flexible, but someone can sit in a regional company, which is what I'm doing now. I'm paid throughout our Canadian organization, but I'm still performing a U.S. or a headquarter role.
Yeah.
So that's an option. So, but to get to that, I think it comes with a little bit more experience than maybe right out of graduation. So if you can work in a regional role, I think that's a really good way to build up your experience, and then you can transition to a global role.
Okay.
So my background is when I came back, we came back for family reasons. So 2016 was when family moved back to Canada. Who was working remotely though, and why did I want to go back to do a PhD? Well, when I left my master's, I didn't really have a plan. I think I just needed a change. I was going through some personal things, so I just needed a bit of a break to focus on just working for a little bit. And I didn't think I didn't think it was going to be a long-term.
So you didn't think regulatory affairs was your career?
No,
at this point.
And let me give you a little story, because I think about this all the time. I got to a point where I was doing the work and I felt, well, this is easy. Everyone can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now learning some of the language, I think it was a bit of a Dunning-Kruger effect, where you get to a point you think, well, you learned a little bit, so you think you know it all.
Yeah, right.
But so I didn't think I wanted to do regulatory because I thought, well, it's not much of a challenge.
That's all there is to it.
And then you spend another year and you realize you know absolutely nothing.
Right.
And I could have spent more time in regulatory. I ended up making a change 18 months ago, well, relatively recently, basically to support a move to do a PhD. I'd always felt something was missing.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I cheated myself. Not that a master's degree is a bad thing, but I felt like I didn't push myself to the final stage. So I was always looking for opportunities to do a PhD, whether it was in regulatory science. I knew there were some schools that were offering that, but nothing really seemed to make sense. What happened was I was working on an amazing project company, and in liver disease, put a product through FDA. It generated a huge amount of buzz. Because of that, I was speaking at these meetings with the top hepatologists of the world. I mean, it was fantastic. And they were treating me like peers. Mm-hmm. And to be in that environment, to be back with the top scientists, just absorbing everything, it was so exciting. I don't like it. It reignited something.
The passion.
Yeah.
And also you develop that technical expertise in the regulatory sphere. So you become a subject matter expert.
Exactly.
So that is why you are considered the peer. So it's intellectually stimulating as well when you're immersing yourself in the literature and trying to get up to speed on that.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just, it's weird how life gives you opportunities, and sometimes you just have to grab hold and see where it takes you.
So you're focused on liver now for your PhD, correct?
Yeah, and the reason why is because I had access to a whole bunch of data sets. I had built up networks with some companies, and that it just made sense to be able to continue that analysis, to write papers, manuscripts about and analyze data based on that. And there's definitely a need for it. So one of the big challenges in the field is biopsy is held as the gold standard. There's been, in clinical practice, there's been a move away from it, but still in clinical trials, the expectation is that you show that the drug changes biopsy for effectiveness. So that's presenting challenges, but we've, through some preliminary analysis that I've done and others, there's evidence that non-invasive testing could be a much better alternative to biopsy, not only in terms of accuracy, but also just convenience and cost effectiveness and making sure compliance. You can have patients that don't have to get.
So this is blood tests that look for, standard AST, ALT, liver enzymes.
Yeah. You can combine that into something called the FIB4 score. There's other tests like ultrasound-based technologies. But yeah, so combined, I had so much data, and I loved doing. I was waking up my daughter trained me to wake up at 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
Ever since she was a baby. So I'm used to waking up at 3, and I would get up and just plug away at my computer, generating some analysis. And it was like, this is a really cool finding. And I started talking with some great mentors, and they were encouraging me to follow up and consider applying. So yeah, after working through some of the challenges, getting funding for the project and getting my supervisor aligned, it turned longer than I was hoping, but it worked out in the end. Ended up applying it was only in January where I was accepted, and yeah, it's been a ride ever since then.
Now, I have to say, it was like a pleasant surprise meeting you at new student orientation. You were absolutely the most qualified grad student I've ever met in my career. So, and we've learned so much from your experience. And I'd just like to know, from like the PhD, does it help you in career progression at the point you're at, because you have such a wealth of experience within the company and in the field in general? That in and of itself is what is going to open doors for you. But what does the PhD do above and beyond, or does it do anything at this point in your kind of level?
From a skill-based, I don't know if there's that much, because I was very involved in my master's degree. It was I feel like it was kind of almost a mini PhD, because I had a lot of ownership of the project and was doing a lot of the research and crafting ideas. Obviously support by lab mates, but I learned a lot of the skills that I'm applying now from that, even from undergrad as well, but researchability. I think that I'm not sure if I'm going to gain any new research skills. Obviously, I'm learning new things. Like in the stats class, and this semester, I can't believe it's probably one of my favorite classes I've ever taken.
Wow.
I mean, I don't particularly enjoy stats, but I actually did. I love this class, and learned. I went from not knowing what R was to
Becoming proficient.
I wouldn't say proficient, but putting together a comprehensive project. And I thought that was really, to learn. So I'm learning new things.
Your technical skills, yeah.
And so I'm applying those for sure. And I was able to present some of that data at a meeting. And so to see tangible things that I've learned, yes, absolutely. I've learned some new things, new tricks in the PhD. But from an overall perspective of how to think, I don't believe I'm going to be substantially different when I complete it. Now, do I need a PhD? I think I'm doing all right for my career, but it's probably not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. Yeah. If you've got it, it's just another credential, and it's a great credential. Yeah. I just wondered, there are obviously people that run the company that don't have their PhDs. So it's not a requirement to move if you have the work experience and the pedigree and you're a good corporate citizen. You can progress without it, but it doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt, but it also in a medical. See, I just I find good companies are filled with good people, and I'm honored to have met so many people in my career. So I was mentored by Ross and our medical sciences team, who actually created a job to be part of the medical team. Now, to be in medical, you generally require an MD or a PhD. So I don't have that. So it would be nice if I had a PhD to at least be at the same level as my peers. So is it necessary? No, I'm doing the job as my colleagues are, but I think it would be appropriate to have a PhD. And if I would, not to say I'm looking to move, but if I did make a move, at least it would be easier for my experience to be recognized a little more, well, with a little more backing behind it, right?
Yeah.
So I think having a PhD will definitely help career advancement if that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely valuable. I don't think this is going to harm me.
I don't think it will harm you, Matt. And we're so happy you're here doing it. Do you believe that you are wanting to move more into medical affairs? Is that where can you see yourself moving in the trajectory? Do you feel like you've done everything and fulfilled yourself within the regulatory sphere? Are you now curious about more the medical affairs side of the organization, or where can you see yourself going now?
So I think I'm the happiest I've ever been. That doesn't mean this is going to be my future career for the rest of my life, but right now, this is an amazing opportunity that I've been given to be able to not only analyze data, write manuscripts, interact with amazing KOLs, thought leaders, but also have the opportunity to do a PhD. I am very happy right now. It's a really good opportunity. I like to say, find at least 10% of your job that you love, and if you can find at least 10%, then it's a job probably worth doing. I'm well past 10%, so I'm really happy where I am right now. I don't know if it's going to be forever, but I think at least for the next several years, at least until the PhD is concluded, I think I can see myself.
This is where you want to be.
Yeah, I still have lots to do in terms of what I think. I think I have opportunities to help shape something clinical practice, which I think my project will help that. And so
you'll be able to execute that within medical.
Yeah, definitely having the combination of the PhD plus the support of within the company, getting a lot of opportunities. So it's really working out really well.
So I'd love to just unpack regulatory affairs and the roles in regulatory affairs in vitro diagnostics. And is that same as medical devices? There's probably slight differences, and if you could speak to that, versus regulatory affairs in pharma, versus regulatory affairs in biologics, because we think of regulatory affairs as being a blanket set of skills that applies regardless of those sectors. I'm sure they are different. And how are they different? And how are skills transferable between them?
So let's start with pharma, biotech, and like blood-based products. So all of those are so biologics would be blood-based and recombinant products and monoclonal antibodies. So all of those I think are you could probably work in the same company and just do all of those. And then, in fact, I mean, when I was there, I was doing helping support or even leading some submissions for blood-based products, recombinant products, and pharma, typical pharma. So all the skills are pretty much transferable. The differences is in manufacturing. So you may chemistry manufacturing, you might need some more skills there to understand the products. But from a clinical aspect, as long as you can learn the clinical disease state, it's transferable, across the skills are transferable.
Great.
I find in vitro diagnostics to be very comparable, probably the closest to pharma, because there's a lot of aspects. It's very different, but there are certain aspects that you need to know, like stability, whereas pure medical device, now with the difference between in vitro diagnostics and a medical device. Now, some regulations treat in vitro diagnostics as a subset of medical devices.
Right. Yeah.
So in Canada, we have the medical devices regulations, which cover in vitro diagnostics and typical non-in vitro diagnostics. So that could be even things like still non-invasive, but imaging technologies like ultrasound. So they could be diagnostics, but not in vitro diagnostics. Right. And they could be things like stents and other medical, what we typically think of as a medical device, syringes and things like that. What I like about IVDs is that the path is very clear. There's classification rules. It's very understandable. It's very approachable. I think medical devices are a little more general because there's so many different categories of medical devices.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of experience in pure medical devices. My experience has all been IVD. But what I still think it is very close. Like the transition from pharma to IVD, it made a lot of sense.
Okay.
You use the same skills, and I would imagine you're using similar skills for medical devices, but it's probably a harder jump from a medical device RA to a pharma.
To a pharma, right?
Right. So I think IVD is kind of in the middle.
Okay. And I think IMS students would probably be more appropriately suited for IVD and medical devices versus pharma. I think pharma, you would really have to have kind of a straight pharmacology background, would you not?
I don't know about that.
No.
I think so. Now things may have changed. When I was doing a pharma RA role, our company had everything was integrated.
Mm-hmm.
So we were doing the chemistry as well as the more clinical side. But I believe now larger companies, they split that off. So chemistry and manufacturing has its own RA side of it. So any submissions related to changes in product manufacturing will be handled by certain groups, and then the actual the indications for use, the clinical aspects of it will be handled by a different team. But so in that case, I mean, you would have different skills. So chemistry and manufacturing, obviously, yes, you're right. That would be probably more a biochemistry background or a pharmacology background. Probably makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
But the clinical aspect, I think,
yeah.
You have to.
You can come from any biomedical background and easily be applicable. Exactly. Matt, can I ask you a personal question? How do you balance doing a PhD, working full time, you have a young family? Yeah. Are you Superman? Like, what do you do? How do you balance those? It just sounds like an impossible harmony to achieve.
So one of the things I think I mentioned is I'm kind of cheating in some respect, that I'm using a portion of my, my PhD is based on
the work that you're doing.
Yeah. So I can justify certain times of writing a manuscript or data analysis. I can say I'm blocking off some time from work to do that, right? So that's part of it. I am working extra time. So I will work, I do wake up early. Like I said, sometimes at 3 in the morning.
3 o'clock. For all you grad students out there, that's what you need to do.
I think the secret is have kids and sleep becomes less relevant.
Right. If you forget what it is and you don't miss it because it's a long distant thought.
So I'm used to operating on less sleep. So that's
part of it.
That's part of it.
Okay.
I will work certain weekends. I am lucky to have a lot of vacation time, so I can take off days to work on PhD related activities. I definitely needed it when I was taking 3 classes at once. That
Yeah.
was a bit nuts.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was taking a few days off just to handle coursework. So I don't think I figured it out. I know my evenings have to be free because I take my kids to Taekwondo. So there's there's definitely has to be hard stops. But I don't really have an answer.
You're just an expert at time management, I guess.
I don't
is
even
the answer.
I don't even know what I'm doing, but it seems to be working. So.
What is the most challenging regulatory submission that you've done, and why?
So I've got two answers. One is my biggest failure, which, okay, I'll start with that. So early in my career, I had a submission. It was a pharma submission. I was leading it. It was first pharma submission that I was actually leading. We were asking for, it was an existing drug, but we were asking for an expansion of the label for new indications for use. There were some extenuating circumstances. There was a lot of concern about other drugs that would come to market that were less, had a different risk benefit profile than our drug. But Health Canada at the time was very cautious. We had submitted with an indication to say that this drug will decrease it or decrease increase the time. So in a pre-diabetic population, it'll increase the time to diabetes. So it was predictive of, or not predictive. It was
Prognostic, really.
Sorry, not prognostic. It was preventative of,
Okay.
somewhat preventative of
Okay.
diabetes.
All right.
So it was a time to diabetes. The claim is based on a time to diabetes onset. The concern back from Health Canada was, well, show us the data. So it was just an offhanded comment at a meeting. Show us that, do you have data to show, or how much time does it extend? And in our thinking, it was, well, it's not really the time, it reduces the incidence of, right? So that the analysis was essentially reduces the incidence of.
Mm-hmm.
But we went and claimed to increase, to slow the onset. And it was just an offhanded comment, and I didn't think anything of it. We all missed it, but I should have caught it. We ended up having to withdraw because we couldn't prove it.
You couldn't prove it.
We couldn't prove
You
it.
didn't have the data.
So if we would have resubmitted, if our response would have been, well, we understand what you're saying, so we've changed our claim to reduces the onset of,
Right.
we would have been able to support that with data.
Right.
But there just wasn't enough time to do that. It was a big learning experience, it was a big lesson to keep my ears open, listen for the smallest tidbits, because that probably is a meaningful thing.
And that every word in your regulatory submission
Yeah,
is going to be picked up
exactly.
and mean something.
Yeah.
So you have to be so careful
Yeah.
with everything that you say.
Yeah.
Because somebody's going to hold you accountable.
So that has haunted me through my career.
But you learn from it.
It was yeah,
and
exactly.
you will never,
I'll never
ever
forget
do that again.
Yeah.
Does that lead you to your next challenge that hopefully turned out better?
So my next one was the one that led me here was our liver fibrosis test. I joined the project after it had kind of gone through some discussions with FDA. There didn't seem to be a path forward, but through other groups, I had come up with an idea of, let's do a prognostic claim for this test. With data, but that was my strategy. We had actually ended up getting data eventually by partnering up with a pharma company, and for about 6 years of not doing anything, but just kind of stewing on it.
Wow.
to having a possibility to presenting to FDA, to them saying, yeah, this is a breakthrough claim, to them submitting it and getting what's called a de novo classification. So basically, first to market of this type of claim. To then, I think I mentioned to get put into clinical practice guidelines, because they wouldn't have done it if it wasn't on the market. To be put on clinical practice clinical practice guidance. I mean, all of that was such an experience, and to work with the best and the brightest in the company and externally, it was just a fantastic experience. And to really work through, to say this is my strategy, and to see it come to pass was such an amazing experience. And then it led, as I mentioned, it led to where I am now.
Where you are now, your PhD. So you never know where it's going to lead. And that kind of answered my question about what do you find most fulfilling about your role. You can see it as those challenges, and really understanding the nuances of the science and the process, and coming up with creative solutions, and also knowing the semantics and how you can frame your arguments. It really is a distillation of so many skill sets.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
That leads me to my next question, or my next set of questions, which I want to touch on advice for students. So first of all, what are the personality types that you typically find successful in these types of roles? So if we have students that are listening, they can, maybe identify these things within themselves and explore this further. So what personalities do well in regulatory?
So I can't speak to everyone. I can speak to my experience, but I think for what worked well for me was an attitude of never giving up, right? I think that's
tenacity.
Yeah, persistence is key. Another one would be to ensure that you listen, right? We talked about that, but listen, keep your mind open to new possibilities. So that's critical. Good writing is essential.
Yeah.
So I like to make sure that when I write, and I don't think everyone has to do this, but I like to write a story. So even if I'm just answering a technical question, I try to build a story or framework. You've got ideas, you put your ideas, and it has to say something.
So strong communicator.
Yeah, exactly.
Must be attention to detail too.
Oh, absolutely.
That must be a big one.
Yeah, and creativity is I think helps a lot. If you have out of the box thinking, right? Instead of trying the same thing over and over, you could come up with new ideas. So those are all, I think, useful skills that you could have. Good negotiation is absolutely critical. So you're forming relationships, right? If you can form a good relationship, you're going to have easier time negotiating.
Yeah, and these are skills absolutely developed in the context of graduate school. So students can easily leverage that into these roles. But I guess my question is, how can students without direct regulatory experience build credibility when applying for their first role in this field?
So I've been thinking a lot about this. I don't know how. I think it's a very difficult environment for students to enter the job market today. I think networking is critical. So if there's opportunities if there's conferences, go talk to the pharma companies, the device companies, talk with the people there, develop relationships, or if the project is funded by a pharma company.
Yeah, and there are a million networking opportunities at the university for our grad students. So Life Sciences Career Development Syndicate, they have networking events, they always have pharma. But it again, is it enough to just have networking? Do you recommend the programs where you can get, certificates in regulatory affairs, like at Humber, like at Sheridan, I think has, Humber and Sheridan have
Seneca,
exactly.
Stoga.
Are those requirements, or would you just recommend them because it just gives them the kind of the foundation that would probably give them a lot more confidence going into regulatory roles?
So I would say the best certificate programs are the ones that offer a co-op.
Yes.
So if you can do a co-op, you get your foot in the door somewhere. You can show that you're capable, right?
You're a thinker.
There's that. There's also the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society. They offer a certificate, so you can just get certification.
How long is that program?
It's not a program. You just take a test.
Oh,
You
fabulous.
study on your own.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now it will show a prospective company that you are committed, right? It's not a guarantee, but it's an extra notch to say, yeah, I'm committed. So I think if the student doesn't have time to spend another year on a regulatory affairs
Certificate.
program, then the RAC certificate is really
It's a good
it's
option.
an option, but it's intense. I've never taken it, but I know others that did, and it's a lot of studying. It's all self-directed studying. You have a textbook, you have to read it, and you can focus on different things. You can focus on pharma, you can focus on medical device, you can focus on Europe, you can focus on US. So there's a lot of different options, but it's intense. But I think it definitely would show some commitment to the field.
Great. I'm going to just ask with maybe some advice that you would give to a biomedical student considering a career in regulatory affairs. Like, what is something that you wish somebody told you about regulatory affairs before you went all in?
Well, I would say that life happens, right? So my biggest, I would say that it's not specific to regulatory, but you don't need to have all the answers going into things. My life would have been different if I took a different path, but I don't know what it would have turned out to be, but I think you can just go in and try it out. It may not be the best option. The company may not be the best fit, but give it
a chance.
Yeah, if there's something of interest. If this is genuinely an interest, try it out. Do some background reading on regulatory affairs. There's textbooks. You can read a textbook. Show some interest.
See if it resonates.
Yeah, and if it is, don't feel bad if after a couple of years this isn't the right thing. I know tons of people that have moved. I know people that have moved from regulatory. They went to a different field and came back to regulatory.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Maybe I'll end up in regulatory again. I don't know. I mean, it's possible. But I think the biggest thing is, just give it a shot if it's genuinely of interest, and it's not going to hurt.
You're right. And you can take it somewhere, and it's great experience to have. Yeah. Last question. If you weren't in regulatory affairs, what would you be doing?
I don't know. Well, now I'm not in regulatory.
Yeah, okay, fair. That is a legit answer. But if you weren't in medical or regulatory affairs, what could you see yourself doing?
I would say, I don't even know.
You are where you need to be, Matt.
I just don't. Yeah, I honestly haven't thought of it. Right. I'm enjoying it. Right. There's nothing that I see. I mean, I could have been in a different role, I guess. I don't know. Or I could have been in a pharma company versus. I would have been in the industry somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe teaching.
Okay.
That I feel. That could have been an option. I don't know. I don't really have an answer. But
maybe we'll get you to explore that too. Stay tuned, IMS students. That's all I'm saying. Well, we have to wrap it up now. And I just want to say thank you again for coming in and sharing your wisdom, your experiences, your fascinating journey. We are so happy to have you on IMS, and we're so thrilled that you came today to share your experience with us, and that you're so open to IMS students and helping them in their journey. So thank you again, Matt.
Well, and thank you for having me, but also thank you for doing these types of initiatives for the students. This is great.
It's fun.